there's a way to test out what you're saying to make sure it's authentic. And it's done with reverse inquiry. So, for example, if I say, I trust people now, I no longer have the belief that I don't trust people for my trauma. Uh, we're speaking from, for example, maybe our current life. We see that we're able to trust people more. We've done some work. Some people shouldn't be trusted. But with trauma, for example, there's almost like this blanket, all-encompassing belief, like, I don't trust people. It's very common with trauma, actually. It even happens in the therapeutic session or one-on-ones, where people have difficulty trusting the therapist or the facilitator, but also they're having difficulty trusting almost anyone in their life because the caregivers that they had when they were children or others around them created an atmosphere where they learned not to trust people. The people closest to them violated boundaries. So there's nothing wrong with having that belief system. It's a protective response. But when we get to be adults and we do some spiritual work, then we might say things that are actually not our experience yet. So we might say, I trust people. We make these statements, but there's a way to check out a statement to see if it actually is true for you. And what it is once you make the statement, feel into the inner body, bring awareness all the way down into the body, because the body keeps the score on all of this. And as you're feeling into the body, I want you to actually look at people, especially your family of origin. Do it now, just try it. And now I want you to say the statement again, but as a reverse inquiry. So you're actually listening for any objections coming from the unconscious, the body. So you would say the same statement, but now it's a reverse inquiry. I trust people. As you're looking at them in awareness, then you might see that the body's keeping the score on something. It might say, no, you can't trust people or something. Listen, after you say, I trust people, as a reverse inquiry, and see if there's any objection that comes up by listening to the body, because the body keeps the score on the past. You may be carrying around a belief system from the past that you don't even realize it's there until you make your inquiry somatic based. So try it now. I trust people. See if there's any objection. Allow all of the objections to come and go in awareness. I'll sit here with you for some of it. Just do a little bit of tapping now so you can step out of the inquiry. You can always come back to that inquiry. I just want to give you a little taste of how the body keeps the score. So when your mind says something that you would like to believe is true, or you like for other people to believe is true about your experience, your body won't lie. It'll produce the thoughts of what you really believe if you're skillful. That's an example. I trust people. Well, let's see. Come down into the body, feel into that, and say it as a reverse inquiry, and then you see the truth of your experience, that there's still distrust coming from the trauma. So this is really helpful to avoid bypassing right here. One simple inquiry to avoid bypassing. So for example, I'll be in session with people, and if I say, they might say, everything is perfect as it is. A kind of a common non-dual phrase, like everything is perfect as it is. It might even feel true if you're not making it somatic based. If you're disconnecting your thought from your body, as if the mind can just be independent like that, you might not be checking down into the body and the old programs around that. So it's very deceptive, easily bypassed. Suffering gets easily bypassed that way as you tell yourself up here no non-dual programming or insights that you would like for it to be true, but is it actually true in your experience? Feel down into the inner body again. Pull up your family of origin or important relationships, even current relationships, and say, as a reverse inquiry, everything is perfect as it is. And listen for any somatic response. That somatic response are programs being held unconsciously that are operating even while you say everything is perfect as it is. Your body keeps the score that everything isn't like that. So then, as the body responds in some way, ask the body or the sensation, what would you say if you had a voice right here? And then you might see more. You might see, oh, I'm not good enough. Some of the older programs start to come to the surface, if you can just witness a little bit of that now. Everything is perfect as it is. As you feel in the inner body may produce something different than if you're saying things in a disembodied way, as if they're true, but you haven't checked it out. You're just saying it really, because it sounds good. Check into your body for the truth of your experience. Just sit with that a little bit. Everything is perfect as it is, including me. I'm perfect as I am. And then the body might produce thoughts. Rest and allow each one of those. You can write these down and come back to these. If you want to just keep listening, you can come back to it later. Just keep listening to do a little bit of tapping on your forehead. Notice the sound and sensation of the tapping, just to kind of put that inquiry to rest. Again, you can come back to it. Just tap in order to continue hearing me so you can see how widely applicable this inquiry is. For example, this whole idea of unconditional love. We say it, we put it in memes like unconditional love is the basis of reality, and the answer is to love everyone and everything unconditionally. So we might start parroting that, right? To others, to ourselves, in a news feed. But is that really authentic for us? See, the body keeps the score. No matter what we say up here, there's a mind-body connection on everything. So if we're not checking into the body, we're just literally bypassing that mind-body connection. We're telling stories. These are stories about unconditional love that are not really our experience yet. So instead, can you pull up your family of origin and the people closest to you, bring awareness to the inner body and rest for a moment. And then, as a reverse inquiry, I unconditionally love everything. As a reverse inquiry, to see if there's any objection. No, I don't. I don't like Joe. Whatever it is, just allow it. Or it's not safe, whatever. Just allow whatever arises. See, now you're seeing the truth of your experience. When you understand and include the mind-body connection, you're not really in the business of bypassing anymore. Because you can see what you believe through reversing that. See that? You can see the holdouts from your past that you haven't dealt with yet. And so what you're doing is overriding all of that in the body by saying things that sound good. It's like we're trying to lull ourselves into awakening, but we're kind of lulling ourselves into sleep with bypassing. Sleep meaning we're saying things that are not actually true for us. And on some level, we're still identified with something, but we're overlooking it and parroting something that sounds good. You can do it with anything that you believe, but I'm sticking to the spiritual insights so that you can stop the bypassing. For example, there are a lot of people in social media that parrot this phrase, there's no self. But is that actually your experience if you're parroting that phrase? See, it's easy to say anything with the mind. The mind can say anything. And, if you don't have the kind of discernment or skill, you wouldn't even be able to tell if it's authentic for you, let alone other people wouldn't be able to tell. So when you send something through the news feed that says there's no self, people assume that that's your actual experience, I would imagine. Why else would you share it? But is that your experience? So instead of just parroting things like that, feel down into the body, bring up people in relationship, because remember, there really isn't a self, but there's this experience of a separate self that comes up in relationship. And the body keeps the score on that. So as you feel down into the body and you see somebody, just say, there's no self here. Now you can do a sort of investigation from that and say, oh yeah, that thought is not me, that thought is not me, whatever, that's fine. But I want you to just listen to what your body says on that. There's no self. See if thoughts get produced that look like there's a self from that inquiry, like some objection. Of course, again, you can take that investigation far, because as these thoughts come up, you can see each one is just a thought. They're appearing to awareness. The thoughts are not a self, they're words. And the feelings and sensations are not a self, they're feelings and sensation. And you might see that there's no self there. But what I'm saying is, you can't really say that until you do the investigation. So if what's being produced is a belief that there is a self, then that's what you're believing. You have to contend with that. Instead of just going back and saying there's no self, now you have to contend with what you actually believe it's held in your body, which is usually like old programming that you just haven't seen yet. Who knows what arises, but the point is, trust your body, turn your insights into reverse inquiries. Let me see if I can give another example. Here's one. We parrot this idea that there's no separation, that it's all one. But is that true for us, each of us? So instead of just parroting it, which becomes really superficial if you think about it, like, because anybody can say anything, right? I mean, nobody's policing. If you come across my newsfeed and you say there's no separation, I assume that's your experience. But there's no way that I would be able to verify it. You have to verify that. There's no way that I can verify if that's your experience. Plus, I'm not even that interested in verifying it. But if I were the poster, if I were the person who put that on there, who said that, I'd be checking into whether that's actually true for me. Is that actually my experience? So feel down into the body and pull one person up that you have a sticky relationship with or a challenging relationship, and just say this: I'm not separate from them in any way. And don't think about it, because that's more parroting. Instead, feel the energy of the body and see if it responds as if to object to that, like as if there is this belief in separation. And then just be with that. Those thoughts that come and go, allow those, because that's what you believe. And you're just not seeing it. See that? You're parroting things on top of that, trying to convince yourself. But what is your actual experience? When you say, I'm not separate from them, trust the body and see if thoughts get produced that indicate otherwise. It's a really good way to test out whether you're living authentically. You can do it in a number of different ways. Authenticity is a big part of awakening, because if you're parroting things that are not actually true in your experience, that's inauthentic. And that's not actually helping you. It might be impressive to others, but it's not helpful for you, right? Because you're literally bypassing things. And why would we be interested in telling other people things that aren't true, unless we're trying to win their approval, their love, or stay safe, or protect ourselves from them or seem special or something. That's not what awakening is about, really. Everything must go, including all of that. So instead of saying, well, let me give another example that's not in the spiritual realm, so to speak. If we say, and this happens all the time in this work, when people first get here, they'll say, yeah, I don't have a problem with anger. It arises and falls. It sounds spiritual to say that. It sounds like, oh, that person's very clear. They're just aware that anger arises and falls, but it's not them. And they don't have to hold it back, for example, because repression hides. So you may be saying things that really are not true for you because it sounds spiritual. For example, one of the things you might say around anger is, I don't have to hold anger back. It's just this arising. It's not me. It comes and it goes. That sounds very spiritual. Sounds very clear in a way. But is it true for you? Come down into your body. You know where I'm going with this. Feel into the body where you would be holding on to that anger, if you would be. And then pull up people in relationship. And then just simply say, I don't have to hold back anger with any of them. And if you start to see programs that say, yes, you have to hold back, then you're recognizing that that's not authentic to say something. You're saying things that are not true for you. See that? And that's where the bypassing happens. Is by parroting things up here and ignoring what we actually believe that can be found in the mind-body connection. It doesn't even have to be about the repression of anger. It can be about any repression of any emotion, but also just any emotion, period. So for example, we might say to ourselves, I've forgiven everybody from my past. I've forgiven the people that raised me. I've forgiven my abusers. I've forgiven all those people. I've healed through my spirituality. Is that true? Or are you just saying that because you want to believe it? Or because it's a peaceful thought? But is it a bypass? Instead of just parroting things like that, what I encourage people to do is test it out, see if it's actually true for you by bringing awareness into the body. Again, that's what keeps the score. We know from trauma. Look at people that you're in relationship with from the past, your family of origin. And if you're saying, I've forgiven everybody, then see if the hurt is still there and unprocessed. So just say it this way. I wasn't hurt by any of them. I don't feel any hurt because of anything that they did. But don't trust your mind. Feel the body first, as if it's saying, yeah, I'm hurt. Feel something there? That's the truth of your experience. Now, as that energy comes up, there may be thoughts with it that align with that energy. Like, I've been hurt. There's the mind-body connection, that the truth of your experience. I've been hurt. I'm hurt with that energy on it. See, that's authentic. And now you can just rest with those thoughts. Let those be. Because before you were trying to override that by saying, I've forgiven everybody, or I've already dealt with all my hurt. I hear that all the time. But the body keeps the score, no matter what your mind says. So when people say to me, they'll come into session or they'll start to work with me and they'll say, I've done a lot of work around the sexual abuse. Okay? Your body doesn't care about that. I'm telling you, it doesn't care about what work you've done. If you're still holding on to the pain of that trauma, you're still holding on to the pain of that trauma. Doesn't matter how much work you've done. And there again is the mind that would like to believe that you've processed it all, but the body doesn't lie. So I could go into another inquiry here around that. I've already done that with anger and hurt, see? But you can imagine that almost anything that you say that you think is true, you can test it out by feeling into the body and turning it into a reverse inquiry. This is how Dan and I essentially developed KI, is because we started to see that the body keeps the score and that a lot of the awareness practices and inquiry weren't reaching into the body where the real programs are. So we developed KI as a mind-body connection inquiry so that we understand that the body holds the truth of our experience, and it produces the truth of our experience if we ask the right questions. And this is what really helps in the bypassing for people, because the body doesn't lie. It does not lie at all. It'll tell you the truth of your experience on everything. This may be somewhat unsettling to people but think about why it's unsettling. Isn't it that something's being pulled out, the rug's being pulled out from under you right now? Right? But isn't that a good thing? Because you were saying things that were not true for you. They were not authentic. So that touches upon the ego that's holding on to these phrases, these ideas, these programs. You're identified with them, and that's just one way in which you avoid dealing with the real issue. See that? And so that's why it might be destabilizing or even threatening to hear this, because you're discovering that despite the things that you've said or that you say, your body feels otherwise. You actually feel otherwise when you inquire skillfully. So that can be threatening. But I think that the audience that listens to these videos is more mature than that. That you're not going to just simply be threatened, oh gosh, Scott Killaby's doing some bullshit here. You're not just going to buy into your trigger and just say, okay, I'm not going to listen. Because I feel like the people that hear these videos are more mature than that. They understand what I'm saying. So you don't have to stop there with just the sense of like being threatened by this. This can actually be an inroad into a more depthful realization that is embodied, because you're including the mind-body connection. And isn't that what you want? Don't you want a more depthful realization? Or do you just want to skim the surface and say poetic and profound things all the time? Do you want that to go deep into your experience? So deep that you're so fully transformed by this work, by this seeing, that you really live in the truth of your experience much more. You live in the truth of it, and you don't parrot things that are not true in your experience. That's authentic. That is powerful. I think it's what most people want, but to have that kind of depth of realization, you have to really challenge what you're believing, even on an unconscious level, because otherwise the unconscious runs things for you, right? So no matter how many times you say everything is perfect as it is, I'm at one with everything, the truth of your experience shows up in your triggers. It shows up in how you actually respond in relationship, which is coming from the body. Yeah. I hope that helps. Just remember this, the next time you say something that you think is true, simply turn it into reverse inquiry. Feel into your body, pull people up, and say the same thing, but listen for objections coming from the body and the unconscious mind. You can do that with anything that you're parroting, and I guarantee you, I really do guarantee you, that if you took that very deeply, you probably wouldn't post a lot of the things that you post or say a lot of the things that you say, because you know that it's not authentic. So you might just stop saying some of that stuff and start living more in the authenticity of your experience. And that's where the true transformation happens. It doesn't really happen by parroting things that aren't true for you. That's actually very deceptive to others and to yourself. To live authentically is to get to the root of the issue and stop parroting things that are not true. I don't say anything on here that is not true for me, because I test everything out. Also, you also will, like, you'll see it in my posts, that everything is based on my experience. Everything I'm saying here is based on my experience. So as you'll notice, I'm not parroting a lot of really profound statements, because I know that if I do that, people will listen and be programmed into believing that that's true, instead of doing the actual work, the transformative work, to see that insight directly. They might just pick it up, start parroting it. And in that way, teachings actually reinforce the sleepiness of humans, because the teachings are just saying things that sound true to people, and people pick them up and repeat them, but it's not true totally in their experience yet. See, it's like putting the cart before the horse. You're saying things you're not experiencing yet, but you might think that you are, because you're just coming from the mind, and the mind will convince you of anything. If you just go there with things, the body will always tell you the truth. Thanks, guys.